open, 39 minutes to 8 o'clock, Big 550 KTRS. Coming up a little bit later on, Aaron Katursky is going to join us. This is peanut allergies. Is it they've got something that maybe, just maybe, might solve this peanut allergy problem. You've talked about this in the news, Kelly Jackson. We'll talk about this a little bit later on. And that is Missouri elementary schools are tossing out and suspending African-American children at a much higher rate than the rest of the country. According to a new study released by UCLA, the district level of out-of-school suspension rates is the highest in Missouri. So we'll touch on that as well. And then, of course, in the 9 o'clock hour, we're going to check in with the Voyager, which left 40 years ago, which was more or less of an unmanned spacecraft, a man-made object, the first man-made object ever to leave the solar system. Mm-hmm. Now, 40 years later, is past the last planet and is now off into space. So we got lots of things going on around here to touch on. The Missouri coming in dead last with out of school suspension rates for African American children. As awful as that sounds, and it's even quoted in the story that, and this is one of the hardest things that people don't realize as a teacher. The first line of defense isn't kick the kid out of school, right? That's the last line of defense. Mm-hmm. But what do you do? How the kid, the troubled teen, the kid, whatever, knows that teachers are evaluated on how many kids they don't send to the principal's office. So teachers don't like to send kids to the principal's office, and yet here in Missouri they do it more than anybody else. But I don't know. There's so many other variables to all of this. I don't know how you can just look at these numbers, draw a line, and say Missouri's the worst. To me, there just seems to be too many other variables when it all comes said and done.
And to tell you the truth, I need to read the full article. Are they talking about particular schools? Okay.
It was
they are
statewide.
Talking about, okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Statewide.
But they do cite like Normandy and I'm talking about in our area because they do talk about Kansas City, like you were saying, statewide. Normandy, Riverview Gardens, each suspended 21% of just their elementary school students.
Right.
21%.
Right.
That's an amount that
Well, it's an alarming amount.
Mm-hmm.
1/5 of your school, you cannot kick the kids out of school. However, if the kids are that disruptive, you got to kick them out of school to save the 80% who are there to learn.
Right.
So, it sounds terrible, and it ultimately sounds, but you're kicking the kid out of school, but you're also doing it not only to protect yourself, but to protect the kids who are there to learn.
That is true, but we're not talking like high school where you would think there would be more issues
right.
with other students and other factors, but these are kids who have barely been in school long enough
yes.
to be kicked out of school.
They clearly have come to school with not the right skills.
Right.
They haven't been taught the right skills to walk into the class. And if you're kicking out 20% of the kids, how are you ever going to turn that quote-unquote failing school district around?
And how is that kid going to be able to right his wrongs, or he or she, once they do return to school? What changes have been made for them to be able to get back into school and to be able to continue to be a viable student?
Correct. All legitimate. When I first read it, I was like, oh, my goodness. Clearly, this is some type of racial something. And then you dive into a little more and you say some of these other schools, well, these school districts are predominantly African-American. Mm-hmm. So you're throwing out 20% of the troubled kids to protect the 80% of the minority kids. So it's not necessarily a race issue.
Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily a white teacher or teacher of another race who's not able to deal with the student
right.
either.
Right.
You know,
I know enough to know enough that Kelvin Adams, the superintendent of the schools in the city of St. Louis, can do anything he wants. That man is so brilliant and so smart and so insightful and has done such an amazing job with such trouble. If he says the kid's got to go, I'm not going to second guess him. I'm not going to sit here in the cheap seats and say, well, how dare you? I mean, this guy's on the front lines. It's kind of like a coach. Excuse me. If a coach doesn't have any players, is the coach a bad player?
A bad coach?
Yeah, a bad coach. If a teacher doesn't have any students to work with, how can they be a bad teacher? So to evaluate teachers, it's very difficult to evaluate teachers or principals or so on and so forth. So as initially, it's like, wow, this is a really disturbing piece. And all of these problems happen in other states as well. So in that sense, it's apples to apples. But in other ways, it's not. So, I mean, it's really very convoluted. It's just another layer on the school systems and the problems that they face. I don't know how you solve the problem because we've all been there where the troubled kid ruined it for the rest of the class.
Yeah, because it does disrupt. You got to stop class. It's just
right.
A black cloud over the class. And you can't learn when you have one student, let alone more than one. I'm telling you, if I was ever suspended from school, it just wouldn't happen.
You're exactly right. You are exactly right. If they even looked at me like we might suspend you, I wouldn't have been able to sit down for a week.
I was such a brown noser anyway.
Wow. I mean, clearly.
But man, what's going on at home that's making these kids act out at school?
Why? That is never brought up enough. People talk about bad teachers. Yeah, there are bad teachers. I get it. There are bad teachers. But what's walking in the door is troubling enough. How can a teacher teach the kid reading, writing, math, skills, all of that, when they haven't been fed, they haven't been clothed, they haven't been bathed, they haven't been read to, which goes to all sorts of societal problems. You can't be Tony La Russa without Albert Pujols. You can't be a Hall of Fame manager. You can't be a Hall of Fame teacher if you have nothing to work with.
That's right.
So it's so sad. 728 here, Big 550 KTRS. Low T Institute of St. Louis has 2 locations here in the St. Louis metropolitan area. In fact, lots of talk about testosterone replacement therapy. And gentlemen, here's how it works. As you get older, your body produces less testosterone. And now it's become in vogue to talk about it. Testosterone therapy for men. And look, a lot of people are trying to make a quick buck by giving you and selling you a bunch of pills. Well, that's really not the way to go about solving your problem. You need to go see a real doctor. And that's where the Low T Institute of St. Louis comes in, because they have 2 locations. One in South County, right off Highway 55 and Lindbergh. Their second location is in Chesterfield Valley, right off Long Road. Now, the Low T Institute of St. Louis has medical doctors on staff, board-certified medical doctors who will treat you, who will give you a battery of tests. They'll find out what those tests say, and then they will design a treatment specific for you. That's what happens when you go to the doctor. That's why it's covered by insurance. That's why it's FDA approved. You want to get back in the saddle? You want to sing that song you used to sing? You want that energy? You want to be able to chase the young kids around? Low T Institute of St. Louis, lowtstl.com. Covered by insurance, FDA approved. What are you waiting for? If you want to solve your medical problem, go see a medical doctor, and that's where the Low T Institute of St. Louis comes in. lowtstl.com.
Our family